Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Shine Spotlight Captivating Awareness, the podcast. You're currently listening to Season 4, Episode 9, and our guest today is Greg Barnsdale. I would love to hand over to our guest speaker. Please feel free to introduce yourself to our community.
Yes, well, thank you for having me on your show today, Claude. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to have you on.
Well, I appreciate your interest in this rather sensitive topic.
Yes, so first and foremost, I would love for you to introduce yourself and share a bit about who you are and for the audience to have more of an understanding of exactly what you do, what your expertise, and a bit about yourself, please.
Yes. Well, I started out my career as a young funeral director back in the 1980s here in the Toronto, Canada area. And I worked for large and small funeral homes as a funeral director. And then I joined the financial planning industry. I wanted to change, and I ended up working as a financial planner who was helping people with their retirement planning. And I noticed a trend in both the funeral industry and the financial planning industry in that many people did not want to talk about potentially bad things happening in their lives, whether it be a disability or a serious illness or perhaps even a premature death. And it frustrated me. And that's what prompted me to publish this book that is behind me. It's the first book that I've ever published, but it's really starting to gain some traction.
And do feel free to tell me a bit about your book. What made you write this book? What are the important messages that you wanted other readers to capture?
Yes. Well, I became frustrated, Claude, at the fact that, as I said, many people that I had spoke to in both the funeral and the financial planning industry were very reluctant to talk about these things, such as a premature death. And I have tried many things that did not work. And then I finally figured out, after quite a long time, that the best way to inspire a lot of people is to educate them on the realities of what happens at the time of a death if the surviving family members know nothing about what the deceased wanted. And I saw this many times in the various funeral homes that I had worked in. And the difference being that if no planning was done, many things went wrong, compared to this type of situation where if the person was more proactive before they died and had a will and had a medical directive and voiced their opinion with their family members about what they wanted, whether they wanted burial or cremation or those sorts of things, the outcome was much better for the survivors.
And what was the biggest turning point in your life that was a game changer?
Well, more recently, I was diagnosed 2 months after I published this little book about proactive planning. And after years of stressing to other people about the importance of them having a will and medical directive and speaking with their family about what they wanted to have happen, 2 months after I published the book, I was diagnosed with a large brain tumor.
Sorry to hear that. Much compassion. And what has been the feedback from the book and the kind of impact that you've made on other readers? I'm sure it's been probably a game changer for them as well, equally as it's been for you.
Yes. Well, in regards to my health diagnosis, shortly after publishing the book, I documented it on social media. My publishing coach stressed the fact that it's vitally important to try new things. So I did. And my stepdaughter actually posted a video on TikTok and it went viral. It was a video that I had taken just after I was diagnosed with the brain tumor, and it's now been viewed over 1.7 million times.
Wow. And when we talk about death and afterlife, What is the current geographic look when it comes to investment and the kind of development and future element of afterlife currently?
Well, I don't necessarily have any insight in regards to afterlife after someone passes away. And I do respect the various cultures and long-standing traditions that various people have after a death. And I've seen many of them from Christians and Muslims and Buddhists and all kinds of different religious backgrounds. And I have always found them to be quite fascinating and interesting. And that's what drew me to be one of the things that drew me to the funeral industry as a young man many years ago. But one of the commonalities that I see now is that there is an increasing trend for people to be prepared. And it's all part of what is now commonly known as the death positive movement.
Wow, interesting. Thank you for that insight. And when you look at the clients and the kind of intake of planning and all that preparation, what is the kind of stages would you say would be taken into account, or people may not know about the kind of undergoing of a funeral director and that kind of element of industry, if I may ask?
Yes. Well, what I have discovered after working in both the funeral industry and the financial planning industry and helping people plan for a good retirement and such is that people are open to being coached or inspired. And the core message now that I'm stressing in all of the podcast interviews and such that I'm involved in is the fact that end of life planning helps reduce the stress of aging. It helps leave survivors more financially and emotionally resilient. It leaves them more likely to get along with each other and less likely to contest the final wishes. It also naturally results in more meaningful legacies instead of a frustrating mess. It often helps charities who desperately need the money, and it takes immense pressure off the courts from otherwise having to deal with so many unorganized estates. And all these things, Claude, help the economy. It's a massive win for everyone. We just need to inspire more people to lean into this planning while minds are clear.
And when we talk about the cost and that kind of element of planning, would you say it's feasible, or would you what's your perspective on this? Because I know that it depends on possibly different, uh, you know, classes or the kind of financial outlay. What's your take on this?
Well, yes, you're exactly right, Claude. Everyone's financial situation and overall situation can be so different, from people who have a very modest type of lifestyle to people who may own a business and perhaps be involved in a family business that has been going on for decades. But it's vitally important that we speak to our family members to, at a very bare minimum, to let them know what we want to be done with our body when we die, as an example. Regardless of the amount of money that we have or the size of our bank account, our loved ones need to know that.
And what's the accessibility element and the kind of inclusion element for different able individuals?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
No problem. So, what I wanted to also ask, and I'm curious to know, is what's the accessible element when it comes to inclusion and that kind of element of different abilities? So, is there like braille features when it comes to taking context of afterlife planning and that kind of process?
Yes. If I understand your question correctly, I
Mm,
think the best way for me to stress this, Claude, is to suggest that every adult should have a will in place. A,
mm,
a, a will is the only document that any of us can specify what we want to have done with our body and with our all of everything that we own, and to nominate someone to be in charge of that after our death. So a will is very important, but also a medical directive or power of attorney, as we call it here in Canada and many other parts of the world, to nominate someone to speak for us if all of a sudden we are incapacitated and in the hospital, as an example, and unable to speak for ourselves. Both of those documents are very important.
And that brings a perfect segue into my next question, because I'm aware that in recent news there's been big discussion on a topic which takes both sides. I know there's a for and against when we talk about assisted dying. I know that also in Canada, and I think some countries, it's been a success. However, there are also cases of concerns when we talk about safeguards of assisted dying. So, what's your view and input, would you say, from your personal experience or experiences that you may know from people who are close to you?
Yes. Medical assistance in dying, or MAID, as it's called here in Canada, has been legal since 2016. And personally, I believe in it. And I know there are people that do not believe in it, but it is a controversial topic. But the numbers of people, Claude, here in Canada, through the surveys and such that I have read, it's very, very clear that the majority of Canadians feel that all of us should have that choice, that if our health is deteriorated to such a point that our quality of life is very, very low, and there is no cure for the type of medical situation that someone is in, the vast majority of Canadians feel that the individual should have that choice to end their life through the MAID program. And there are many safeguards in place to make sure that it is not it is only for those situations that truly qualify for it. And I have a cousin of mine that ended his life through the MAID program back in October, and I witnessed it for the first time, and it was a very peaceful death. It was hard for me to witness, but it was a very peaceful way for him to die.
Thank you so much for sharing, and that takes a lot of courage to share as well. Such a kind of debatable topic, so thank you. I would love to also ask, what is the kind of investment when it comes to funeral directors or when it comes to afterlife care? Do you feel that, would you say this industry is supported, or do you feel there's more that could be considered that may have not been considered?
Well, I'm really only familiar with the funeral industry here in Canada and to a degree in the United States, where it's very, very similar. But from what I understand of the funeral industry in the UK, there are many commonalities too. But there is a trend that I have seen throughout my career, and it really comes down to the fact that people, to a large degree, do not see the same value in a traditional funeral as was the case years ago. In other words, what many people are opting for now is immediate cremation and no funeral, which is much cheaper, but not necessarily. I'm not saying it's necessarily better. And I mention this in my book, this trend away from traditional funerals.
Thank you for that insight. And it's really important. And I will ask this question in regards to, because we've had this issue as well, where we have a thing called like British veterans. So people who fought for our rights and fought for world peace and went to war back in, like, the Victorian age. The same for also on an international scale. However, there's been a story where some veterans, uh, you could say, resting place has had to be disturbed because of capacity. So when we talk about funeral capacity, what is the best way that funeral directors are managing the capacity of people who are dying and their uh, pa- resting space being protected?
Well, I'm not familiar with how the rules and situation is in the UK, but I know here in Canada that we are running out of cemetery space. And I've spoke with other people who are very involved in this, and although more and more people are choosing cremation, which allows for more effective use of burials, as an example, compared to a full-size casket being buried in a grave in a cemetery, the trend is still that with the increasing population and just the lack of space in cemeteries that we have currently here in Canada, it will become a problem in the next number of years, and more planning needs to be done in this way.
Thank you so much for that really insightful context. I would also love to ask, in regards to Canada and Canada's future, I'm aware that your is it Prime Minister or leadership in your country is currently stepping down. So, what would you say the future of Canada looks like from here and till the future?
Well, you're exactly right. Our current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, is in the midst of stepping down. I think over the last few weeks, since President Trump in the US has been elected and come into power, that Justin Trudeau has done a good job standing up to him and all of the changes. But as I'm sure you've heard within your media in the UK, President Trump is putting in place a number of harsh tariffs against Canada, Mexico, and I understand a number of other countries too. But predicting what will happen in the future, Claude, I don't know in regards to what's going to happen. But I do suspect that Canada is going to be challenged with these tariffs coming very soon.
Thank you so much for sharing. And who were your inspirations, like three role models that you may have had in life as you was growing up?
Could you repeat the question, please, Claude?
No problem. I would love to ask who were your inspirations, so like your role models as you was growing up.
Well, I've had a few of them. I would say that one of the most recent role models that I've had is my publishing coach, David Chilton, who changed the face of retirement planning actually years ago. And I've taken a lot of his teachings and so on in regards to publishing my book. But in regards to mentors beyond that, I can't think of any offhand, but I have had a few actually.
Thank you for sharing. And in regards to world peace, do you believe that we could have world peace?
Could you repeat the question?
No problem. Do you believe you could have world peace? So, do you believe in world peace?
World peace. I wish we could have world peace, but it seems the way that the world is going, I wonder if that will ever happen, but we certainly need more of it. And by the way, my wife and I are very encouraged by the recent work that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has done with the European Union. It's been very impressive.
Thank you for sharing. And in your own experience of brain tumor, where are you currently now? Have you been able to be in the admission, so like recovery, or what is the kind of statistics when we talk about brain tumor and the kind of best ways
Yeah.
people can support?
Yes. When I was diagnosed with my brain tumor shortly after publication of my book 2 years ago, I initially did not know if it was cancerous, but it ended up being non-cancerous, and I was very, very lucky. So I have had it removed 2 years ago. I had a craniotomy, and there is still a small amount of the non-cancerous tumor wrapped around several facial nerves and my brainstem but they are monitoring that with regular MRIs.
Thank you for sharing. And is there any projects or things you would love to share with my community for them to best support or be aware of?
Well, any of your listeners, Claude, can go to my website to learn more about my book and my message. My website is donotignoreyourmortality.com. My book is available almost everywhere, and it's available in physical book, ebook, and audiobook format.
Well, thank you so much for today, and thank you to everyone who's joined. And I would love to say that do stay tuned, and also do keep an eye to our social media and our platforms for our next interview edition of Shine a Spotlight Captivating Awareness.
All right. Thank you.